So when Tim asked me to talk about images of celebration and Mardi Gras, I thought, oh, no problem, I'll just find some images. Well, I have to tell you, there are very few paintings of images of Mardi Gras. However, I have found some. We're going to go back in history a little bit. But I also wanted to talk about a contemporary artist as well, and also look at some early 20th century artists who kind of resonate with, at least with the theme of jazz. But before I do that, I just wanted to remind us what Mardi Gras looks like. I think most of us know New Orleans images. I think when we think Mardi Gras, we think of New Orleans. We think of Rio de Janeiro, Carnival in Rio de Janeiro, but Dakar, Marseille, cities across the world celebrate Mardi Gras, Carnival, which is the same, basically means the same thing, culminating with the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday, before Lent starts. Here's the huge one in Rio, which apparently I just read is being postponed to April this year, probably, I assume because of COVID. And Venice. Venice, I think when we think historically, I think we think of Venice as the site of what is the raucous celebration that we now think of New Orleans. I think Venice in its day was the New Orleans of Mardi Gras then. And there are a couple of aspects as I was doing a little bit of research and thinking about this, about Mardi Gras, about the beginning of Lent. And there are a couple of themes that keep coming up. One is the theme of identity, of masking your identity, of taking on a different persona. Another one is the theme of food and starting to restrict the excesses of life. So, as Carnival is to celebrate all of these excesses, Lent is to restrict yourself. So I wanted to look at some of the ways that these themes kind of run together in some of the art that we're going to look at today. So going back, looking at Mardi Gras celebrations, Mardi Gras in New Orleans starts in the late 19th century. And these are some designs. This is kind of the art of Mardi Gras that you find from New Orleans, these designs for floats and costumes that well-known artists were commissioned to design for the various crews and the various celebrations of Mardi Gras. I was reading about the way that the white population would have balls. They'd have costume balls, and they would be inside, and there would be orchestras that played waltzes and things like that, where the black and Creole population would be outside with all the good music, right? So eventually what happens is the white population goes out into the streets and joins the rest of the New Orleans population. I thought that was fascinating. And it really speaks to the power of jazz, and what jazz is, at least to me, is this combination of all these cultures and musical traditions coming together. But I love this. And this was, if you see, it was the missing links theme, which is fascinating, and it was making fun of Darwin. This whole sort of float and crew doing nothing but satirizing Darwin and what he was saying, and it was apparently incredibly racist, and it even got stopped and wasn't allowed to cross the river and all kinds of things. But these kinds of designs are really wonderful. I only had room to put one in, but they're worth looking up at some point. If you just Google Mardi Gras drawings, they'll pop up and you'll find some really interesting articles about them. But it's this idea of dressing up as someone else, as taking on another persona that we see starting at Mardi Gras early on in New Orleans. There's an artist, unfortunately the color didn't come out quite so well in this projector, but there's a contemporary artist today whose name is Nick Cave. He is an African-American artist who grew up in the South and does what he calls sound suits. I'll just focus on that one. He's inspired by Mardi Gras. He's inspired by the costumes of Mardi Gras. He also talks about the way that he sees these costumes as a way to hide yourself, to not be vulnerable. As a black man who's responding to what's happening in the world, especially to black men, he started to think about the way that these suits could be worn without your identity being revealed. He calls them sound suits because they move a lot and they make a lot of noise. And the sound, he talks about sort of, making noise in the world, but making noise in a way where no one's going to attack you, right? No one's going to question you because you are in this celebratory costume. And many of them look like, especially the first one that I showed you, well, even these, they very much look like kind of, if you ever see the pictures of the streets of New Orleans after Mardi Gras parade, they kind of look like all the stuff that he's gathered up and used to create these suits. So I think my thinking is, in terms of an artist who is making work about Mardi Gras right now, to me, he is the artist who's directly responding to that. So to go back a little bit, as I mentioned, two themes, changing identity and food. So the Franz Hals, which is on the right, shows Shrovetide revelers, Shrovetide meaning Fat Tuesday, the day that people eat pancakes and get ready for the restrictions of Lent. And it's hard to see, but the red cheeks and red noses of these revelers show that they've been drinking a lot. They've got a lot of food and drink in their hands. And the interesting thing is what looks like the young woman in the front is actually a man who's dressed up as a woman. The themes of cross-dressing, of taking on another gender, is something that we see celebrated and explored throughout images of Carnival as well. The one on the left, John Molinar, the battle between Carnival and Lent. It's a little hard to see. The figures on the right are monks, and they are fighting with townspeople. And what they're fighting with are spears that are full of fish and the foods of Lent, which tend to be things like pretzels or dry bread and things like that. The townspeople have pork and big pieces of meat and things like that. So, and it's also, look at the vertical definition, right? On the left-hand side are the bad people, right? The townspeople who are reveling and having a lot of fun, and on the right-hand side are the monks. It's always the left that's the evil side, which, as a lefty, I really take exception to, but it's almost always the case. But here, you really see that food theme here. This is a print from 1580 of Carnival and Lent. This is Quaresima, which means 40 days, which is the period of Lent. So I don't know how well you can see, but the hat that Carnival is wearing is full of sausages and meats, and the hat that Quaresima is wearing is full of fish and corn and vegetables and things like that. So again, that reminder. This idea of a battle is something that we continue to see in early art too. This is a 16th century image of Carnival and Lent in carts. And again, I'm sorry, it's so hard to see, but an image of Carnival is being pulled in on the left and Lent on the right. And in the middle, the townspeople are all battling. And again, food is involved here as well. I'll show you a better image of Bruegel's replication of sort of this whole idea. This is the Battle of Carnival and Lent. In the foreground, do you see the man in blue? He's sitting on a giant beer barrel. He's got a hat on his head that's made of a meat pie. It's got the legs of a crow or some kind of chicken sticking out of it. He's got a pork chop that is stuck to the top of the end of the barrel with a big knife. He's got a soup pot that he's using as a stirrup. And he's followed by a man in yellow, which is, yellow was a symbol of untruthfulness, I guess you could say. And so on the left-hand side is Carnival, and he's got a spear that's got a pig's head on it. And on the right, the woman in blue is represented as kind of this emaciated, she looks like a nun or something like that. And she has a beehive on her head, which was a symbol of the church at the time. And she's got a long paddle that has fish on it. A monk and a nun are carrying her on this cart, pulling the cart. There are some pretzels, some bread, and some pancakes here. There's a bowl of mussels there. And she's surrounded by children, and all of them have the symbol of Ash Wednesday on their forehead. So it's very clearly this battle between, this is the meeting of Fat Tuesday and Ash Wednesday. And it's all around food in the foreground, except if you look at the bigger picture, and typical of Bruegel, if you know any of his work, he often has just the life goes on, and you see these images in his paintings that many from the scriptures. So you see the crucifixion of Christ and nobody's watching, or you see the Icarus falling from the sky and nobody's watching. It's about how life goes on when momentous events are happening. But here, he also has this left-right opposition. The people on the left are all reveling. There's somewhere in there is a musician who's throwing up, for those of you who are musicians. Reference to music there. The church is on the right. On the left are beggars and peasants who are going hungry. On the right are people who are leaving the church and feeding the peasants and the beggars. Bruegel isn't saying, he's not passing judgment on any of these people. He's just showing us what is. Right? During Lent, we pay more attention to these things. During Carnival and the rest of the year, we don't. There's all kinds of symbolism in here that's just absolutely fascinating. I just wanted to point out two things. So here's the left, which shows a very well-fed musician here, and this person behind them carrying waffles or pancakes or something like that are going to be eaten. And then this is the entrance to the church, where during Lent, apparently the sculptures, the statues were covered with shrouds during the 40 days of Lent. And then someone is sitting here apparently collecting money so that if you wanted to touch one of the relics in the church, you would be able to pay for that. So those are just some details that I wanted to show you from this, and we could talk about this forever, but there's just all kinds of stuff going on in this painting that makes reference to that battle, right? That coming up against that moment that we're sort of asked to think about what we're willing to sacrifice and to celebrate like crazy right before we do. Another work that I wanted to make reference to, and it's interesting, the reading that you read today, Tim, I almost put a different painting in here of the feast in the house of Levi, which is Christ eating with the tax collectors. But I chose this one instead. And this is by an artist named Veronese, who lives in Venice. So we're going back to that wonderful city that celebrated Carnival in a way that probably is only rivaled by New Orleans these days. And this painting tells the story of Christ going with his mother to a wedding feast, and they run out of wine, and it's his first miracle, isn't it? Thank you, good. He changes the water into wine. And seemed a bit blasphemous. Veronese was always one of those people who was on the verge of getting called into, in fact he did with the feast in the house of Levi, of being called blasphemous and being punished for his inclusion of Christ in these raucous party scenes. But this work shows Christ right in the center with people from all walks of life, right? And again, thinking about Mardi Gras, thinking about celebration and the way that Mardi Gras brings people together, people who come from all different ethnicities, all different socioeconomic backgrounds, and they can even hide it, right, especially in Mardi Gras. Well, here there's all kinds of people who seem to be in costumes, except we know that this is Venice, and Venice was kind of the cultural center of the world, and so people from all over the world were always gathered there. There are personifications of great leaders from all over Europe and from the East as well. And the foreground features 4 musicians. And Veronese has placed himself and 3 other famous artists as the musicians. So there's a self-portrait. This is his self-portrait. This is Titian. This is, oh shoot, now I can't remember their names. Bassano and, sorry, I just am having a little brain freeze here. But 4 very prominent artists are in the personification of musicians. And the interesting thing here, again, to kind of get us back to a music theme, no one in this entire painting is talking. No one is talking to each other. The only representation of sound is the music. And the reason for that is this was placed in the refectory of the Benedictine monks. The refectory is their dining hall. And according to their tradition, they don't speak when they eat. And so no one is speaking in this, what looks like this raucous party, but the music is allowed to play. And I just love that idea. And the fact that the artist has decided to give himself the voice here is a really, I just think it's so interesting. I think there's a lot that could be explored in that. I wanted to this is a bit of a segue. I just wanted to show you a couple of artists, African-American artists, who do celebrate music in a way that speaks to African-American culture. This is Aaron Douglas, who did a number of murals for the Harlem Public Library back in 1934. And he did 4 murals called Aspects of Negro Life. And throughout them, these are just 2, the first one and the last one, the African in Africa, and something called Song of the Towers, where this man is standing. I don't know how well you can tell, but there's a Statue of Liberty right back here. But at the center of each one of these murals is music, is someone playing music. So here they're dancing and people are playing drums, and you've got this sort of talismanic figure here. And then in New York, he's with a saxophone. It's a little hard to see. With the figure of the Statue of Liberty. This consistency of music. And most of Aaron Douglas's work makes reference to music. He illustrated a lot of religious treatises as well with prints that made reference to music too. I'll show them to you someday. And this one of my favorite artists, Archibald Motley, who was from Chicago and did a lot of these street life and interior scenes of people enjoying themselves with music. And this idea of joyous celebration, while it's not of Mardi Gras in New Orleans, I think that it has that kind of aspect of people coming out and being together, all different kinds of people. And you know what? I think I'm just going to stop there. I could go on, and I told Tim I was going to talk for 45 minutes, and he got a little upset with me. So, so I think I'll stop there. I think I've given you a couple of images to look at throughout history, and thank you for inviting me.